Thank you for being here. Hope it's gonna be a very interesting panel. We have very interesting people here, and to talk about payments in English. It's interesting to have a talk in English, I think, about this topic, and have different points of view from persons from different parts of the world. If you may introduce yourselves, each one, to the audience a little bit, it will be amazing.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juan Villaseñor. I'm part of the Stori team, leading all the processing part at Stori, 5 years, and, well, nice to be here.
I'm Zoya Lieberman. I've also learned that in LATAM, I'm not Zoya, I'm Soya. So I'm part of the Endava team, and I work with a lot of financial institutions and brokers on strategy and payment space.
Hi, everyone. My name is Przemysław, but probably it will be easier Pedro, as it's a bit exotic name. I am in Forex, brokerage, finance, banking for around 14 years. Currently working with much trade technologies and much to pay. So we serve brokers with all they need, financial technology, payments, and I focus currently on crypto payments for brokerage.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited for the opportunity. I'm Ignacio Morales. I'm head of Mexico for OnlyMint. We are a company, a global company, that our motto is payments without borders. So what we do is that we try to have the best experience for companies to operate in any country with any currency and facilitate payments. So thanks for having me.
Hi everyone, I'm Ramiro Hernandez. I'm the commercial director for Mercado Pago, which is the fintech arm for Mercado Libre, one of the e-commerce giants of the region. Basically, I lead all of our B2B business for payment processing. So any kind of payment solutions for merchants processing above $50,000 a month, basically. I'm very happy to be here and to share the panel with all these incredible people.
Amazing. Perfect. So hopefully we can do this talk a little bit more interactive. At the end, we're going to have some times. If you want to ask any questions, please do so. And hopefully we can do this, as easygoing as possible. We're going to have hopefully a time to ask 10 questions, and each panelist will have time to give his answer. And hopefully we can do this, as a conversation and more as a talk, as it should be. So I have several questions. I'm going to start right on with the first one. This one is for you, Zoya. How significant are partnerships within the payment ecosystem, particularly in relation to regulation and government involvement?
Really awesome question. Thank you so much. I know this event is very much focused on LATAM, and I want to be the contrarian and say that even though it's focused on LATAM, I think we all know that partnerships in the fintech and banking space face exactly the same challenges, no matter whether you are in LATAM or in North America or in Europe or Middle East or Asia or whatnot, right? So even look at the crowd at this event. A lot of people tend to speak to those that they know well and like, right? So the same goes with partnerships. A lot of times, partnerships exist on paper, yet both sides only think about what's in it for me without really thinking what's good for the entire industry. And I think with LATAM being kind of the new baby on the block that receives a lot of attention, this is an opportunity for this region to actually do things right. So when we talk about partnerships and involvement of government or partnerships that are done between two independent parties, I think we need to consider the fact that in this particular industry, everybody needs to be aware of the fact that there are different rules, different regulations. LATAM is unique, not just as a region, but each country is unique with its own set of rules. And the way the business is done is also different. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. But I think generally speaking, if you look at European market or even North American market, a lot of transactions tend to be just that, very transactional in nature. Well, you all know that in LATAM, that is not the way the business is done. So it's not really even things being lost in translation, because we all can figure a way to speak common language. It's just common language culturally is where we have a problem. I don't know if you were listening to the panel earlier today, and every single person on that panel was not from LATAM. And they're all here for a reason. I just don't know if they know what that reason is yet, right? We all know that we all need to be here, but we also don't know culturally how we need to do business together. So to me, when it comes to partnerships between fintechs and banks and between each other, this is exactly that. Learning how to not think about what's in it for me only, but thinking about what's the best for the industry holistically, right? So that's kind of my big opening statement, if you will.
Thank you.
If I may comment on that point, I think on the previous panel and in every panel, the example of success stories like Pix in Brazil comes out to play. And you have other success stories, PC in Colombia, UPI in India, we have CODI in Mexico. And the government, each government tries to make the best out of that payment ecosystem. But what there's a missing link is how to integrate the different countries, not geographies, the different countries, to integrate that. So Brazil, PIX, does very little to Mexico. And there's a lot of trade between those countries, and there's not a seamless way of transacting. That's where fintechs are crucial to integrate that. And we need to have partnership with different countries and different entities, while there's a common block and going to increase the ease of transactions. So that's my take on that.
Very interesting.
If I can also add to this, when I hear words like integration, partnership, I immediately think, and payments here, you can see a lot of CRMs that exhibit at this expo, which are specifically for Forex. And it is also important that there is partnership between these technological parties and payment providers, so that brokers make sure that payments are integrated right, that there are no mistakes, that their flow is good, because most of the brokers, merchants, in this case brokerage merchants, they will focus rather on CRM specific for the industry. And so it's also very important to be around, to talk together, to make sure that the clients, the brokers, are happy in the end, and their clients, the traders, as well.
Daniel, let me complement and perhaps add on what Ignacio was saying regarding specifically, I think, on the role of government. I think in Brazil, we have that successful story about PIX, and I think a key element of that success story was that the government, the regulator, brought a lot of the different actors to the table, right? I think what you will find in Latin America and most countries is that most of the regulation has been written by traditional banks, and most often fintechs and other innovative parties have not been part of that discussion, have not been necessarily influencing or helping drive that agenda. And I think that's a really important aspect, right? Unless we start collaborating on sort of like a three-pronged approach between traditional institutions, neo-fintechs, etc., and the regulators, and unless we have all those three parties combined talking to each other, I think we're going to face a lot of challenges, and we're going to have situations. For example, you mentioned CODI. I think CODI is actually not a success story. And part of the reason why it wasn't that successful, I think, is because they didn't sit everyone at the table, and they didn't think necessarily about all of the different angles. And that's a key difference with PIX, right? And for example, with CODI, you cannot monetize the transactions. With PIX, you can. And so there is an incentive for whoever is transacting to push that payment method. Those kind of things, I think, need to change in Latin America if we're going to see a leap forward and if we're going to see a success story in the next 5 to 10 years.
And Daniel, I would like to add another important topic is how to standardize all the industry, because we have players talking in one type of message, and at the end, it's really difficult to integrate with every player. So in this way of how can all the different players of the ecosystem work together and standardize, it could also help.
Yeah. Daniel thought that he's going to the next question, but he's not. I'm going to agree with Juan and actually disagree with Ramiro because I like to be contrarian on the panel. And while I absolutely agree with you that it is a success story in Brazil, but I think the important point that you made is the fact that it was government mandated. And I think that's a critical piece because for a lot of us that live in the countries where there is no government mandate, then you're comparing apples and oranges, right? When you live in the countries like Mexico or United States where there is free enterprise and there are no specific rules of engagement, or there are very specific rules for financial institutions, but no rules for fintechs, or different set of rules for fintechs like it is for Mexico, you can't all play by the same book, right? So I know banks tend to get a lot of bad reputation and everybody thinks they're necessary evil. At the same time, banks have fiduciary duty and responsibility to work with different types of customers. And let's be honest, fintechs are not at all being judged by the same scale as financial institutions do, right? So for fintechs, a lot of times it's expected that a lot of them will fail. And it's okay, because that's part of it, right? It's the sexy part. For financial institution, God forbid they fail, that's it, end of the world. So I think we also need to be honest with ourselves and say, well, everybody wants to have a seat at the table, then you need to be able to play by the same rules, like Juan said, and everybody needs to take good and bad equally.
Very interesting. Definitely, there's a lot to do here in Mexico and in LATAM, and incentives play an important role in Stori and other instant payment solutions, right? So, yeah, we have enough to talk about this for a while, but let's take another question so we can discuss other topics. This one is for you, Ramiro. A little bit think about the future and trends in payments. How do you perceive innovation shaping the future of payments? In the short term, within this year, and in the medium term, looking like 5 years ahead?
Yeah, so I think we were discussing already some of these trends, right? I think in LATAM what you're seeing is an enormous digitization of payments, where specifically I think we're seeing the rise of alternative payment methods, wallets like Mercado Pago, like PayPal, etc., and you have more and more of these fintechs coming to the market and gaining share. I think we're also seeing the rise of and the importance of bank transfers. In Mexico, bank transfers is already the third most common payment method after debit and credit cards, even larger than wallets. And I think on this front of payments, we're going to see an evolution, and I think we're going to have in different markets success stories like Pix, right? So instant payments. Stori, now Mexico has this new iteration that we're calling Demo. So I think instant payments are here to stay, and I think we're going to see a rise on that front. And I would mention two other things that I think are going to change the industry in the next few years. I think one has to do with open banking and data sharing. I think LATAM per se, it's a slightly riskier environment in terms of fraud, chargebacks, etc. There has been little collaboration so far in terms of institutions sharing fraud prevention strategies, fraud prevention data, etc. And I think open banking is going to allow us to push that forward. And other than that, I think we're also going to see a rapid change, and I think it's already happening in some countries like Brazil, not only on the online side of payments, but on the physical side of payments. And I think that's happening with contactless, with people paying with their phones, etc. If you think about it, in Mexico, you have 50% of the population that is unbanked, 20% of the population has a credit card, yet 85% of people have a phone. Most of those are smartphones. So if you went for some kind of digital payment method, everyone very rapidly could have access to some kind of digital payment method that they could even use on a physical store. So I think that's sort of what's coming. It's not everything, but I think those are some of the key trends. I'm sure here everyone has a lot to complement on that front.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Completely agree, but let's see also what are the drivers that are going to drive that change. So what you're seeing is speed, convenience, price is going to be the driver of this evolution. So now you cannot force as a merchant to accept just one type of payment. You have to be open to any type of payment. Either is, you mentioned Pix in Brazil, or debit, or credit, or your phone, or whatever payment comes. The merchants are eager to accept every type of payments when you can receive your money of your purchase almost instantly that you're expecting as a merchant, and without a charge. If you're accepting debit or credit, you're expected to receive 5%, 3% less of your sale, and that's the cost of doing business. If I may add one additional one is without risk. So there's not going to be a fraud into it. So those are the drivers. There's going to be a lot of things coming up, but I think within that framework.
Could I disagree again?
Sure.
Okay. I like to involve the audience. So I have a question for the audience. Do you guys remember the old movie, Devil Wears Prada? Remember that? Everybody knows that movie. Remember the monologue in there where Meryl Streep talks about how long it takes for something from the runway to make it to regular department store and how we're all subject to it, but it takes a while. So I feel like that similar comparison is applicable to what Ramiro and Ignacio just said. We're all, I feel like, a little bit in the la-la land because we live and breathe this type of stuff every day. But I don't think we're aware how long it's going to take to actually make it to the general population, if you will. So I think we need to be mindful of the fact that there's so many different players, and just because fintechs are ready to move doesn't mean that other players are ready to move. And also, last time I checked, in a lot of LATAM countries, a lot of customers and consumers and businesses alike are still part of the cash-driven economy, right? Where everything is done at the cafe, with cash, and so they're completely invisible to this digital space. So I think it's going to take a while until we get to the point where this is everyday normal, especially in this region. I will say, because I feel like Ramiro, you and I tend to disagree on stage, that means we're going to be BFFs off stage. Last year, I've traveled to London multiple times, to Warsaw, to Israel, a bunch of other places. Not a single time I found myself in a situation where I said, I need some cash. Not a single time, right? So think about it and our behaviors as consumers. Having said that, I think Ignacio made a point about security. Yes, speed and convenience are paramount, but when you're a business, security is your number one concern. So let's not forget about that.
Daniel, I want to add here something because I'm really passionate about the topic. And even issuers, acquirers can do the best and put the best technology. The final consumer is the most important piece. If they don't want to use that trend, it's never going to happen. And in Mexico, we have numbers. From each 1,000 transactions we make, 70 are only contactless. And from those 70 transactions, 3 to 5 are done with Apple Wallet or Google Wallet. So we are really far away from that. In our position, we want to start this digitization of the customers, but also when is the right moment? Because if only one player starts to move, it's going to be difficult. We need the ecosystem as industry to push it. And as Zoya mentioned, one day, hopefully, we don't need cash at all to make transactions.
And just to be clear, I could not agree more with both of you. We still have a very long way to go. Mexico, in particular, is a very cash-driven economy. I do think that these are trends that are going to be accelerating. I think it's going to take a lot of time. And I know it very personally. We brought some payment methods to Mexico, like QR payments, that ended up failing, specifically for what you were saying, right? the customers weren't ready to adopt it. And changing that behavior, I think, is one of the biggest challenges, right? Sometimes we look at the fundamentals and we say, wow, LATAM looks amazing. We're all going to make a ton of money. We're going to digitize a ton of people. And then it doesn't happen, or it takes a lot lower. It goes a lot slower than we actually think. And I think, those are the idiosyncrasies, the local differences. I think those are some of the challenges of changing habits. And it's going to take time. I agree with you. Nonetheless, I do think that these are trends that are going to be happening in the next few years.
Yeah, they will, but we're all humans, right? And we're not perfect, and we don't like change. And the only reason we change is because we have to. So before the pandemic, I did not think I'm going to be doing as many restaurant deliveries and grocery deliveries as I do now. Now you will never see me in the grocery store. Not going to happen. So I think a lot of times it's necessity that drives our behavior. So I think that's where we need to find that balance, because it's necessity, or it's a government mandate, or it's a business balance, or all of us eventually coming together and saying, okay, here are the rules we're all playing by. That doesn't matter which part of the world, we all agree we're going to do this, and that's how you're going to get to that point.
If I can also narrow a bit the topic, because let's not forget that we are at IFX EXPO. So we speak about a specific type of customer. So what you say that maybe people here are not ready is right in general. But don't forget that we speak about investors. We speak about traders. These people have computers, worst case, tablets or mobile phones. They already are digitalized. So I think if we speak about them, that will be quite easy. Like the problem that the cash is still the king here, it doesn't matter to those people, because these people already are banked. These people already are aware of what is investment, and they just want to have more access to global markets. So I think this kind of makes it a bit easier, at least for this audience. So this audience has it easier than average person, I would say.
I love this panel because I want to disagree with every single person on it. So now it's Przemysław's turn. I agree that brokers are totally sophisticated people, and having worked with actually Mexican bank that very heavy in FX space that should not be named, and working with the brokers and understanding their point of view and being close to the client and refusing to let transaction to stop, because that's what, I don't know what's going on with my mic, but making sure that they take the trade over the phone because that's their relationship completely contradicts what we're talking about. So I also think it's changing behavior, even those that have access to different types of payments, but changing the behavior of how they do business, especially in this industry.
Perfect. Amazing. Very interesting. So let's do a follow-up question on that. Maybe this will be for you, Juan. What are your thoughts, or from your experience, what are the challenges encountered when implementing new technology in your organization? What are those internal challenges or external challenges you have seen?
Yeah, that's a really good one. First of all, any new technology brings a lot of money invested. So the analysis to make and really be sure that we want to invest there is like number one. Once we have the approval to move on, the following one is, do we have the best talent to go with that technology that we want to implement? If not, we need to train or search outside to get them. Then implementation, we want to move as fast as possible, but sometimes that is not easy. There are a lot of constraints outside, since vendors, since regulation and stuff like that. And finally, for us, it's really important to follow up regulation. So we need to be really careful about what trend or technology we want to start implementing that is okay with the Mexican regulation, and we comply so we can be under the good scope. So it goes through a lot of processes.
Very interesting. Anyone wants to comment?
Just one comment on this. In terms of new technology, you will always have the flavor of the week. There's a new thing popping up, and if we have a global view, then that multiplies. So what we, as our company, our vision is, let's try to keep it simple to integrate. Just the best way to do it quickly and to integrate and in all parts that is necessary in the world. So that ease of integration is what our clients are loving to do, and that's what we're trying to provide.
And just to follow up on what Ignacio was saying, I think if you're thinking internally, at least from my experience, and I think this happens whether you're a large company or a small company, it's about prioritization, right? How do you prioritize resources? As you said, you have new technology, you have new trends, new things that are interesting and you want to implement almost every week. How do you avoid, how do you say no to certain things so you can prioritize, so you can focus on what really matters? I think that's one of the biggest challenges. It's very easy to go chasing, all these like wild ideas that come up and that seem very promising. I would say from the external side, you were asking, internal versus external challenges. I would go back to what we were saying in the previous question, right? Changing behavior. I think oftentimes we bring really good ideas to the market that have really strong fundamentals, but finding and really understanding, do we have product market fit? Can this scale? Is it a really good solution that the client values? Is it a 10x solution that the client will adopt and will actually grow? Or do I just have something that is cool, it's good, but it will never scale? And the client is not ready to adopt it, at least in its current form. And I think that's a really big challenge as well.
Very interesting. So you wanna say, add something? You wanna be controversial?
No, I think I'm going to agree with Ramiro this time. I don't know what to do here. Yeah, totally agree with that. I would just want to add one comment. When we talk about focusing on what's important and what matters, I think this is a really tough challenge these days because there's so much noise in the industry that it's hard to decipher, what's important and what's not. Does anybody have FOMO like I do? Fear of missing out? I have a major FOMO, which makes it even worse. And I can't take the credit for this phrase, but I heard somebody say that instead of boiling the ocean, we should first boil a cup of tea. And I think that's very relevant and applicable because we all get so busy with all these new things that are happening, and they may make sense 5 years from now or 2 years from now, but we need to focus on what's happening today and get the priorities straight.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Zoya. Okay, let's move on with another question. This will be maybe for you, Ramiro or Ignacio. What are the advantages or disadvantages of integrating AI and machine learning within the payment ecosystem?
Thanks. Whether we like it or not, artificial intelligence, it's going to be here. So we better make the best out of it. And I think when it comes to repetitive and things that comes that are required speed on that process, we need to integrate. I'm going to put a couple of examples. In terms of evaluating a customer, if it's a good customer or not, or it's a fraudulent customer or not, meaning know your customer, that's something that it's definitely we need to do that. We don't need to take weeks to evaluate a large merchant and see the background checks on the owners, and so that things should be almost immediate. So that's one of the things that we need to integrate that. Another part that I think it's necessary to have is on customer service. I'm not gonna say that the human interaction or the basic interaction with the customer and the company. It's also the feed that provides that interaction. If I see, I'm going to put an example, one customer using this debit card very often in the same transaction, let's suggest him to use Pay or another things that it's cheaper to them, and the customer will appreciate that, and it's going to create stickiness to that. So better suggestion is not only to give in that one the best option, but also to be a partner with your client. So those are the things that I see coming up.
Perfect. Ramiro, you want to add something?
Well, I think, for Mercado Libre, we've been using artificial intelligence even before ChatGPT 4 came out and it became such a trending topic. We use it a lot on our fraud prevention models and on our fraud prevention systems. We're starting to use a lot of ChatGPT for software engineering to help with code, etc. tasks, basically task assistance. We're also exploring shopping assistants, etc. So I think there's an enormous potential with AI. I think we need to look at how we can leverage that technology and use it. But I will go back to what Zoya was saying. It's a lot of it. It's also about prioritizing. Hey, like what are the really good use cases for AI, and what's noise, or what's gonna take me away from other core things. It's definitely a technology that is here to stay. I think it's definitely a technology that is gonna accelerate a lot of our businesses. I think it's also really important to understand what are those key use cases for each organization, and the answer is gonna be different, where you really can take a lot of value out of AI and shed the rest.
Also adding on AI, I agree with these use cases. It's really great, but there is one place where crypto will be the future for AI, and I think that's monitoring. Because you have a lot of broken systems, you have a lot of banks, a lot of, even SWIFT, they are strictly regulated. They won't let AI learn on it. But crypto is open. With blockchain, you see all the history of transactions, so I think it will get a competitive advantage over all the other technologies in the near future, at least for this reason. Because AI will be able to pick up everything for fraud, for AML, whereas in other systems it might be used for onboarding, but for monitoring it will be too complex. It won't have enough data, in my opinion.
Very interesting. And definitely also fraudsters are going to use AI. They're also going to, that's the downside of AI, Also we have to be always ahead of the fraudsters. So definitely that's very interesting. Okay, regarding KYC, we know it's a very important part of the ecosystem, payment ecosystem. Can any of you just share, like in LATAM, what would be like those 3 things you have to do in your KYC that are, a must do?
Maybe I'll pick on this one. Again, if we speak about brokerage, the big plus for payment providers is that their counterparties are often almost always regulated financial institutions, which are also obliged to do their KYC. So that's more actually of a question how the brokers will approach KYC, but for payment providers, these are perfect partners. You have MLRO with whom you can speak. You have AML people, compliance people. So this actually makes it a little bit easier to work with financial institutions like Forex brokers, because there is understanding on both sides. And that's for sure important thing for this industry.
I will, again, because obviously I like to disagree just for the hell of it, right? I want to maybe add another point that, yes, we're all in heavily regulated space. However, a lot of times we talk about the underbanked, like the new market, and also younger generation. So if you combine those two, you face a lot of problems from the KYC standpoint, because a lot of younger people don't own cars, because why should they? They live with their parents, even in places like United States, where traditionally people left after college or before college. Now the trend has been reversed. They don't own credit cards. Only alternative forms of payments are being used. So even from credit scoring standpoint, this is a really tough proposition, right? And I've heard 7 years ago at one of events like this that most likely we're going to have to start using like social media presence and your citizenship and other things to understand whether this is a credit-worthy individual. And I think this is where we're getting to right now, because from KYC standpoint, I feel like it may be a black hole or a Pandora's box from traditional way of understanding who your customers are, whether they're credit-worthy and whatnot. So I think that's something that we're all going to have to think about. I personally don't have any answers to that.
And I think, bringing this, joining, if you will, both sides of the question here, like, I think a lot of brokerage firms, a lot of investment firms, when you look at LATAM, when you look at a place like Mexico, you're thinking about how can I bring more people into the play, right? there's very few people actually that have investment accounts in Mexico. I think it's something like 7 million accounts for a country of 130 million people. Mexicans are not as used, like in the US, to have a 401k, etc. And I think when you look at companies like GBM, that they went from something like 500,000 accounts to 5 million, and they have something like 90% market share. When you're bringing these to a retail sector, right? When you move away from institutional investors and you're trying to bring regular people and make them invest, I think KYC is going to be challenging. I think knowing those customers, having the information, and how can we leverage technology to make that KYC process more expedient, faster, simpler, etc. I think that's going to be a key challenge. And I think that's where there is a lot of innovation going on right now. And it brings you back to some of the things that we were talking in the beginning, right? About partnerships. Like a lot of the companies that are trying to push forward investment accounts not necessarily have the right KYC technology, but they can partner with someone that has that technology. And I think those are some of the key things going ahead.
Definitely, very interesting. We have 3 minutes left. I don't know if the audience has any questions that you want to ask. We can. Any questions about local payments?
Thank you for the talk to everyone. So I have a question. Do you see any value on continuing the use of cash in the world economy? I mean, we're seeing this trend of digitalizing everything, but what about keeping the cash economy? Do you see any value in having that?
I think it depends on whom you're talking to. If you're talking to a company that owns ATMs, absolutely there is value in cash. But if you talk to somebody like us, maybe not. Or maybe a better way of putting it, maybe there is no value in keeping cash as we know it. But we do have digital form of cash. So it's still going to be here. It's just going to take a different form, right? So that's my philosophical answer to that.
Oh, I finally get to disagree with Zoya. The thing with cash, it has a terrific user experience. So it's going to be around. It's going to decrease in the volume, but it's going to still be around. So the value that at least our company sees is that we need to provide solutions that includes cash. So if we are in the e-commerce space, we need to accept credit, debit, crypto, and even cash. So we need to think that I've been in this business 25 years, and I've heard that there's a war on cash. And at least in Mexico, since I started, it went from 92% to 82%. That's more or less the payment that is done by cash. So it's not a very effective war. So I hope that it increases and it goes down, but we need to keep in mind that our solution need to include cash as well as the other payment methods.
I think I'm going to return the favor and disagree with Ignacio and kind of agree with Juan. You cannot force the behavior that doesn't want to exist. And I'm only purely speaking about what I've seen in the United States. Yes, you do have a lot of businesses that are required to take cash, like restaurants, but you also have a sign that says, we will accept your cash, but we're not going to be able to give you any change. So in fact, they're kind of avoiding the rules or bending the rules to their advantage because they want their customers to use a different behavior. So yes, we're probably being funny when we say cash is not here to stay. It probably will be here for a really long time, but you can probably make a lot of use cases why it's going to be minimal or maybe not. Who knows?
Very interesting, definitely. Anybody else has another question?
Well, thank you so much. This is Jimena from InSwitch. And sorry for my English, I'm Mexican, so I'll do my best. You're talking about has to be taken into account, but what about the tax, the tax compliance? Because we have a lot of, this is the headache of several merchants. Netflix, Spotify, Disney as well. So what about that? And if you are disagree or agree, just I want to hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, finally, I'm in a pickle. I have no idea if I agree or disagree. I think this is actually a conversation that I had with my colleagues from Colombia, and they were talking about just that, that with a lot of especially smaller merchants and small business, it's that dilemma. Do you keep being a cash business, or do you have to deal with all the tax implication and being visible and whatnot? And I don't think there is any good answer, because for any business, the first answer is what's in it for me, right? So unless there is a clear distinction to what's in it for me and why is this a good idea for me to do this, you're not going to get anywhere. So I think that's probably small business is such a gray area that I don't think we'll get any good answers for a really long time.
Yeah, but just to add, I mean, I do think that when we're talking about tax, a lot of it is going to come down to the authorities, right? And what kind of push the government wants to make in terms of fiscalizing, if you will, parts of the economy, right? And so we've seen countries like Brazil, we've seen countries like India that have made a really big push to take cash away from the economy so they can actually see what transactions are happening, and you can tax that. There are other countries where the push is not necessarily there, because it can be very unpopular as a government to start fiscalizing businesses, especially small businesses. Those are boats, right? And if you're getting into businesses' pockets and you start taxing them, it's not necessarily popular. So it really depends on the government's stance, and I think it's a lot of it is down to the authorities, to be honest.
Especially if it's an election year, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, for listening to this talk. Thank you for all of you for being here, for taking the time to be here and speak about this interesting topic. And well, thank you, everybody, and we'll be around if you want to talk. Just approach us. Thank you.